It was reported that people just went crazy and wild because of this anti-Muslim movie, or anti-Muhammad, I guess, movie. But then I heard Hillary Clinton say that it was an act of terrorism. Is it? What do you say?
Well, we're still doing an investigation.
It's clear that based upon the facts on the ground that were coming from the people who were actually getting the feed of information from on site in Libya, that they understood it to be a terrorist attack. And then even on questioning, General Dempsey and Secretary Panetta certainly understood it as well. So it begs the question of where did this information about it being in response to a demonstration really come from?
Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen, National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, both with two big pieces about 450 pages of sworn testimony that Fox News has obtained. They were previously top secret classified documents until late this evening, and broken on this show, one of them showing some testimony about why exactly the military said from the very beginning that it was a terrorist attack, and what the president may have been briefed by Secretary Panetta at the time and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Here's some of that testimony with Colonel George Bristol, commander of AFRICOM Joint Special Operations Task Force. Questioner is Representative Brad Wenstrup from Ohio. So no one from the military was ever advising that you are aware of that this was a demonstration gone out of control. It was always considered an attack. Bristol, yes, sir. Wenstrup, on the United States, yes, sir. We referred to it as the attack. Much more in these 450 pages. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. There may be more to this. These are the Benghazi transcripts that we have so far, and we'll have a number of different stories on this. Steve, your thoughts on what's come out tonight?
Well, that's a pretty significant development, that the military briefers who spoke to the president on the night of the attack were telling him, in fact, I mean, in the words of Ham, this was not a demonstration, this was a terrorist attack.
General Carter Ham.
General Carter Ham, telling the president that on the evening of the attack. Now, even if you believe that the video played some role, that the video, that al-Qaeda types used the video as a pretext, as an excuse, as something to get people ginned up on the streets of Benghazi, it was clear to top military officials, top CIA officials, one of whom sent a memo the next day naming the people involved, that this was an attack, that there was some level of pre-planning, and that it evidenced some sophistication. For the president and his advisors to go out and for 2 weeks pretend that that wasn't the case is quite extraordinary. I mean, you could see the change in the president's language too. Remember, the president and Susan Rice and others who came out and said, look, this was just a demonstration. It went out, it was because of this video. At some point, about 2 weeks in, the president says, well, you know, we had these jihadists and they used this video as an excuse to go out and conduct an attack. Well, that doesn't quite get it right, but it gets closer to the truth. But that's 2 weeks later. Why were they saying this all along?
Mara, I mean, people go back to, first of all, they're confused overall about the story. And you have to get back into the timeline of how things happened. And two, they go back to the thing that sticks in their mind probably the most, and that's Secretary Clinton in testimony saying, what difference does it make?
Right. Well, the difference that it might make is if she was tied in some way to either deciding not to call it a terrorist attack or in some way refusing the help and security that the diplomats needed on the ground there. I don't know if we've gotten to that level, but what we do have again with these documents is that the administration, for some reason, went out of its way, especially in the talking points given to Susan Rice, and she repeated them on television over and over again, that this somehow was a spontaneous demonstration motivated in part or whole by the anti-Islamic video. That clearly wasn't the case, and that's what this is all about. Why the administration described it in a way that turned out not to be true.
Charles.
I think the why is obvious. It was a way to maintain the fiction as an election was approaching, Obama boasting bin Laden dead, GM alive, that al-Qaeda was on the run. They didn't want this, an obvious instance of a terrorist attack on the 9/11 anniversary, to refute that story. So the questions remain, how did this start? Since it obviously didn't start with the military. The military was telling the president on that very night. And the second question is, for these weeks, afterward, when the pretense was out there, how could the people who knew, including, you know, very honorable people like the Secretary of Defense and others, stay quiet when they could see a falsehood being said? And when you think of the question that Hillary Clinton asked, what difference does it make? You know, there's something Clintonian in the question. There's a difference between the truth and a lie. The difference is that people in high office with public trust ought not lie. And if it was a lie, for whatever political or other reason, it shouldn't have happened, and the administration itself should have traced it down and corrected it, and they didn't. And that's what is disturbing and remains disturbing.
The other side of this is Jennifer Griffin's reporting about the military readiness, Steve, and that's September 10th, the White House puts out a press release in where it details how it's getting ready for preparations on September 11th. Take a listen to Representative Martha Roby.
The problem with the September 10th press release, other than it's blatant, you know, we weren't ready and we said that we were. It's the weeks and months leading up to that issuance of a press release saying that we were prepared. It was misleading. And quite frankly, as demonstrated on September 11th, it was wrong.
Steve.
Well, I think that's right, and I don't think there's any question, really, from anybody who, at this point, that we were militarily unprepared, and that significant requests for enhanced security had been ignored and systematically ignored. There's also confirmation in the midst of these 450 pages in an exchange that Jason Chaffetz had with Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Gibson, who was, people might recall, one of the figures in the exchange that was painted so vividly in the testimony of Gregory Hicks, who said, you know, had this guy on the ground, I told him to go. He wanted to go from Tripoli to Benghazi, and he was told he couldn't go. And Chaffetz, in the middle of this this hearing, asks Gibson about that, says, is that true? And Gibson basically says, it is true. That did happen. And you know, he tried to put it in context. He said, I just want you to know I was furious that night. I was really angry. But he basically offers a second compelling source to the testimony that Greg Hicks gave, which I think, again, it's outrageous.
To your point, Mara, about the security at that facility, the ARB, the Accountability Review Board, said that it was temporary. That was one of the reasons they didn't secure it. Yet, we reported last week that they had just renewed a lease for another year at that very facility, and there were calls for security to be upgraded at that.
Right, and you know, even if it's temporary for another year, when the ambassador goes to visit, you have to be able to have it secure. I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing that there was a great dereliction of security for our diplomatic officials. I mean, I don't think there's any two ways about that. The question is, does it get to the level of a political problem for Hillary Clinton? I think that's the big question going forward. And there really hasn't been a lot of action on anybody paying the price for it. Not yet.
No, of course, there's none whatsoever. The only person who's been jailed over the assassinations in Benghazi is a hapless Coptic filmmaker who spent some time in jail. I'm not even sure if he's still in jail, but he went to jail. You'd think in a country with the First Amendment he wouldn't. He did. Nobody who participated in the attack is in jail or even apprehended.
We'll have more from these Benghazi transcripts throughout the week. Next up.